make sure that you're achieving more than you're achieving in your life. So it's really impactful to do.
Yeah, and they're those moments that make you good.
Yeah, Vanessa Garrard, thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be an exciting conversation because there's
It already is.
Yeah, it's already kicked off well. So thanks so much for coming on. And I suppose we'll kick off with the start of your career because that's the only part that I couldn't really marry up online. I know you got into sales as well.
I started working at 8. I was doing weeding gardens.
Jack Bloomfield.
Well, you know what happened though? I wanted a toffee apple, so we went. My parents, we used to go there and it 50 cents, right, to get a toffee apple from the fruit shop. And one day I asked Mum for a toffee apple, and she said, "Well, when you've got your own money." So I nicked 50 cents out of Dad's wallet.
Perfect. Shortcutted.
Walked in there and then went and paid for it myself. And of course, they knew I'd nicked it, so I got home and got flogged. But the lesson was Dad sat down and said, "You can't take the money; you need to make it." So I remember being 8 and having this hard discussion, saying, "Well, how do I make money?" Because I really want that toffee apple. And then he said, "Well, you've got to do something that people will pay you for." So we're looking around and we said, look around the neighbourhood and see what needs to be done. And all our neighbours were busy working and, so their gardens needed weeded. So I walked around and said, well, look, I'll $5 to weed your gardens. So that ended up being one job, another job, and bought enough to buy some tools and then did more and made it easier. So I started there and then did newspaper run and catalogues and selling lollies. And I started my first lolly business at 12. So I was at school and then recruited all my friends to come and sell lollies down the streets. We used to walk down baskets and sell lollies door to door. And then I think we had about 50 kids working for us at one point. It was almost like this little franchise.
It's like 2 schools.
It's a big payroll.
Well, they made 50 cents a bag. So it was, so I just started from there. And then I bought businesses and sold businesses and quite a lot over the years.
I love that. Shame you two missed the generational thing because Tom had a childhood business growing up. What was it?
He used to sell wormweed that looked like lemonade. Terrible business idea. Yeah. I had a worm farm and my mum's like, why don't you sell fertilizer? So I set up a replica lemonade stand that was selling basically manure but looked like it was fresh lemonade. So people would pull up in their cars like, what are you selling? And it's like wormweed. And they're like, what the fuck? And then just drive off. And looking back, I was like,
it would have gone hand in hand with your weeding business.
I should have met you earlier, yeah. What I love about your startup story, and I'm super curious, because obviously going and weeding people's gardens at the start, it's very one-to-one.
Yeah.
Did you realize, what stage did you start to kind of realize that scaling was going to make your job easier? Like you were just managing versus...
When I got into the lolly business, I think it was then.
Your eyes kind of opened to be like, wait a second, why am I trying to do everything one-to-one?
Yeah.
What if I had help and then I just managed them and now I happen to be a part of it?
Yeah, and I think even that got me into private label, right? Because I started looking at it going, how do I make more profit? 12. And so then it was, okay, go to the lolly manufacturer and say, can we do our own brand? So it was even for every level trying to work out how do you kind of make this more efficient and make more money. But it was then going, okay, if I get a van. So I was standing out the front of school in Marsden. I went to Marsden High. And standing out the front looking for any parents who had a big van. So I could fit more kids in there, right? So, and then so they can be the driver.
That is not normal 12-year-old thoughts.
Imagine a 12-year-old, no fear, full of passion, willing to do anything. It's the perfect catalyst.
Needs a van.
Well, it's funny though, because I wasn't very confident. And it was my dad really pushing me to do it. And even to the point where...
What did he do?
Well, they always wanted to do business and they didn't do particularly well.
So live through your kids.
Yeah, well, they were working like 3 jobs each and struggling. And back then, I think I remember going to school and talking to my teachers about the interest rates being like 19% and could lose their house and, knew way too much of everything economically because parents just talked about it all the time. So I just thought there had to be an easier way of doing things, right? So, and you had to contribute. So we were still, giving money back to the house. But I think I remember, and Dad still says this now, he really had to push me to go and do the door-to-door sales and do that. And
it's super hard. It's not comfortable.
No.
It's how we started both of our businesses, and it's the most uncomfortable thing you could think of doing. And then when you do it, you're like, no one else will do this.
And if you stop for a period of time, you get real bad at it. You get weak. It's like training a muscle. You just have to do it all the time to stay tough.
Yeah. And I had to remember why. Like Dad was saying, why are you doing it? I remember, I was playing competitive netball for Queensland and all that back then. So it was saving up for those trips because my parents couldn't afford it. So it was then going, when I was selling, the idea of selling didn't seem so bad because I would explain that I was saving up for that. So it was always saving to go on that trip or do something. So it wasn't that, it didn't feel like you were taking people's money. So you were, putting it towards something. And that's how I got over that. And the confidence then grew that you could sell. And there had to be good reasons to why you're doing what you're doing, right? And adding some value or, goes towards something beneficial, I suppose.
So that was your pitch.
Yeah,
At
yeah.
the door.
Yeah.
It's a good pitch.
Yeah. They're saying, I'm selling lollies and I'm saving up for this trip to, we're New Zealand, I think, at the time.
I could be the next Firebird champion. Can you help me?
Okay, well, I'll buy 3 bags.
I'll remember you. If you come to a game, I'll remember you.
But the same thing happened when I was at a cafe and a young girl, they made their own earrings and they were saving up to go on a ski trip.
Yeah.
And I bought $30 worth and I think I took one earring so they could keep going.
Yeah. We had the kids down the road come up, they'll walk up with little plants, they've stolen plants out of the garden, put it in a pot and come up and try and sell them. And you always buy something, right? Because you want to encourage that kind of entrepreneurial kind of gene, I suppose.
It's a perfect pitch as a kid because it's the best moneymaker at that age. There's nothing else. It's the easiest
Youth
work.
is the greatest gift. Yeah.
And then you start getting too old and they're like, hang on a second.
You've been knocking on this door for 20 years.
Are you sure you're going on this trip? You've been on more holidays than I have. So at what age then did you start to, like, at some point, I guess you kind of ditched the lolly business and then you moved into something else, or you kind of kept progressing through school and then?
So my mum and dad separated and moved and the lolly business kind of stayed where my mum was. So we were like 40 minutes away, so we weren't able to keep it going.
Once a fortnight.
Yeah.
1 week away.
So then I was at school and doing, 3 jobs around school and I was doing about 80 hours a week at one point and then left school and got into, I think I was managing a gym and I was working in a home exhibition centre. Then I owned that, so I bought that off the people who were managing at the time. I was 18 then.
So a home exhibition centre at 18.
Were you always a saver? Like it was
No.
natural?
No, and that's why I've got 4 kids and I always now it's like you earn money, they do jobs, put it in the bank.
Put a percentage away.
Yeah, we didn't because you always earned it. So you always knew you could earn it, right? So you'd spend it. So it was never that. I never worried about ever being out of a job or you always knew you could do something.
There was more money around the corner, so
yeah.
why?
Or
Yeah.
just go and work harder. So get another job, right? So, I'd be working 3 or 4 jobs at a time, just going from one shift and 5 minutes later running into the other one. So it was just, I never saved. And that's where I've learnt that probably when I had my daughter, at 27, I really started to knuckle down and save at that point.
It's such a weird, because your parents, I guess, didn't instill that on you. Maybe they instilled the hard work part, but not the saving part.
Yeah.
And I'm even finding with my brother, he's starting to kind of come into some money with his like career. And I've forced him to open another bank account and just put aside a separate amount that he doesn't know about, doesn't see. And he's really enjoying saying he has no money to people. Like I'm seeing it's rubbing off that he's like, I've got no money. And he doesn't mean he has no money that he won't pay for things. He means he has no money that he physically can't access the money that he does have. And I'm like, wow, it's so weird how like if I just had those few tips when I was younger, because my mum was always like working really hard, just meeting kind of her obligations, if you will. It wasn't like saving isn't really an option. It's like you've just got to make work with what you've got. So the idea of then having excess on top of that is like not really an obvious thing.
Well, I do. I mean, even with my, 15-year-old, it's now as she started working at Woolies. I'm saying every 1,000 she saves, I'll give her $50 extra as a bonus, right? So she runs in going, you owe me $50.
I did it again.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then she's never got any money in the account, right? Because she's again opened up another account, so just put it in there. You don't miss it if it's not there. But all of a sudden she's excited about the bank balance.
Yeah. Well, you can always spend the money.
Yeah, when you have money and you've saved up, you're like, you don't want to spend it. But when you're just teetering on the edge, you're like, it's $5, I'll get that coffee, or it's $50, we'll get a carton of beer. Because you don't really, it's like, it's not like I'm ever going to save. So I think it's massively psychological.
Yeah.
100%.
You do get that big lump sum, you're like, yes, I don't want to lose it. We're not going back. And then you just keep chipping away at it and it grows.
Yeah, but I mean, I also had the concept where I would buy something. So I knew, even when I was doing the lollies, I'd work out that I wanted a computer or whatever it'd be. This is how many bags I need to sell to get that and save it for that, go and buy that, but then it'd be on the next thing you want to buy, right? So you weren't actually kind of really saving and it was
Your
buying
lifestyle
something.
could always match your income.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a worry? Like, I feel like I bring this up every episode, but I'm super curious to hear everyone's like thoughts on it. You think with this generation, that's a kind of concern with stuff like Afterpay, and we're moving away from these credit cards to like really simple borrowing. Like we run some web stores ourselves, and to see how the experiences of signing up for Afterpay, I was like, I'm going to sign up on my phone and not use it. It only needed my Facebook account, and I had like a line of credit, and I was like, whoa, that's kind of scary. I was like, that was like a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. And like you're saying, you didn't get that education younger. Maybe you got the work hard mentality, which is an even better mentality in my eyes. 'Cause you can, in a way, like you can fix the saving part later on, but the making money, learning that skill is like for life. You think with kids these days, it's like they're kind of waking up in this system where it's a bit hard to kind of realize that they're being taken advantage of from a lending capacity before it's too late, where you do end up in a situation where you're like, I'm so tired from work, I just want to get a case of beers and then switch off for the weekend. And I've got no savings left, no extra income, and then I'll work it out next week when I get my pay in my account again.
I don't know. I think there's a different mindset too. We were talking about this the other day about, real estate and things. The whole idea of the ambition of getting your own house isn't the same, right? So the younger ones coming through are just going, well, we'll just, and that longevity of living in one place or being the same job for years isn't there.
Instant gratification.
Yeah. So I need it now, and I want to move there, and I want to go now this weekend. I want to be at the beach, and I want to be, overseas, whatever. I don't think there's that long-term thought on a lot of it. And I think I didn't get it certainly until I had the kids, right? So then you're going, oh shit, we need to think about legacy and what are we teaching them? So it was when you're single and free and doing all that, it's probably good to get out of your system, right? To go and just party and do whatever you want. But you start to, and I think as you age, you start to think about, okay, I need to really consider having some money in the bank and a backup plan, and what happens if I can't work, right? My biggest fear is not that I physically couldn't turn up to work, because I will no matter what, never have time off. But if I got hit on the head and I couldn't think, we're fucked.
Yeah. It all falls back on you.
Yeah. So that's the thing where you're going, oh shit, okay, I need a backup plan. Because what's to say something happens and then, I'm the income earner, right? So that's where you start to really think about saving and, insurances and all that sort of boring stuff.
Did you think that pressure was a good thing for you, that you had this like back against the wall in a way where you're like, I'm keeping everything together in a way? Was that a good motivator for you, or do you think it's almost like sometimes it can be like unhealthy, like if that makes sense?
Oh, it's completely unhealthy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think
did you look?
I love business.
That's what I mean. Like, did you look back and go, "I'm great. I'm glad I had those incentives, if you will, because it pushed me more than I maybe would have pushed myself without them."
Well, I think now it's not money, right?
Correct.
It's what I can do and impact, and it's
100%
legacy, and it's what I do with Bravehearts, and it's how I help other entrepreneurs coming up. And there's a whole different ambition as to why I do it, and share the information. It's not trying to tell someone this is how you got to do business or this is what you got to do. It's more about here's what I've learned, because there's so much I would have wanted to know to make things easier along the way. And I think understanding, particularly even with E3 things I went through with that company, it was so funny. We shit hit the fan there. It was how many people had come out, even in Brisbane, big business people, and within Australia, some of these are $1 billion companies coming to me and saying, oh shit, we went through that too, but it was never out there in the media. And I wish we'd known that beforehand, because it would have dealt with things differently.
All depends on the news cycle. Like, it might have just been a hot topic at that time, and your story gets sort of – it's like, from what I've read, because I've only run, I guess, the one successful business, and I've like persevered to like not end up in a situation where I've been caught out per se, but it's probably one of the hardest experiences you ever go through. It's like public shaming on top of like people then calling on you, like all of these mixed factors, and then your own self then having to kind of reconcile and digest all of that.
Yeah, and I don't like conflict. Right?
No one does, yeah.
Even, I had a blogger that was an asshole, and none of it was true. Never rang me, never, it's so much of it. We had the lawyers go back and say, okay, this is what you need to correct, and this is wrong. It was point by point, right? We had this articles, and you just highlight everything that was wrong. He didn't give a shit, and you can't make him change it. So at least with, Courier Mail or whatever, they'd ring you and say, hey, you got to check this, and you'd be able to fact check and say, okay, no, this is actually what happened. But it's hard in that space too, and it was really personal attacks. It was me personally. It wasn't anything. It wouldn't take the other side or understand the whole circumstance. That was really difficult. And I think that's where what I realised over the years too was it was me leading those businesses. It was me out in front all the time. We had, I had hundreds of staff and several companies, and so it's always that double-edged sword too, to say, I've got to take that hit personally. Right, and I've got to shelter this team. We've got to keep going and work together. So it was really difficult.
Oh, how did it happen that people weren't getting paid when it went into administration?
Yep.
How did that start coming about?
I had really, there's a whole book in this, I think. But so we were the largest consumer electronics private label company in Australia, right? So we'd done that for years. And there's a competitor company, a distributor, very different business model. And I used to work for them years ago, but we had one of their sales guys come and ask for a job with me. And there was, I look back now and there were so many things I could have stopped this beforehand, that awareness, and I ignored it. And anyway, he took 16 hard drives of information from our server and went to that competitor, and then they started competing on every job. So these are jobs that we had a really advanced model in that we would work 12 months out with projects. So multi-million-dollar projects with Officeworks or JB Hi-Fi, and do these massive programs. So no one else was anywhere near us. We had more floor space than anybody in terms of product SKUs and dollars. So these plans would take 12 months to build, and then they were up to 12 months ahead. So he took every one of those projects, every supplier, all the cost pricing, even the presentations, everything, right? So it was only after he'd been there a couple of weeks, then I started getting suppliers calling, customers calling, even to the point where he was pitching presentations, just putting their logo on it. Typos even that we had in one of ours. And so I'm walking into buyers and they're saying, oh no, we've got exactly the same program with cheaper pricing. I'm like, how? We developed the stuff, right? We've tooled it, or, and they're going, no. And they're showing me these presentations with their logo on it. It's my presentation, right? My company have built this and spent 12 months doing it. So in the end, it was I did the Supreme Court case against them. So it was $12 million worth of GP that had gone. So, and then $40 million worth of impact and sales, right? And that was our 12-month block. So at that point, we did 23 million the year before. So that would have, going up to 60, but I'd hired more staff. We'd put more expense into the business to ramp up for this expansion. And everything was locked in. So it was the point where the quotes had been accepted by the buyers, ready to go. And it's all FOB, so it takes 6 months, even once they order, to get the stuff in. So some of these were like a week before it was about to order. We would have those orders locked in, and then we find out they've got the deal because they've undercut us. It was just unbelievable.
And how do you start a business like that? That is a massive, how did you start that business? How did
E3?
Yeah.
Well, that was I was working for this other company and doing sales for them.
Yeah.
And I remember going and saying that I was walking into they had their brand on everything, right? So walking into Dick Smith and they'd say, look, we want our own brand on it. They were huge into private label at the time. And I'd walk back in and say, look, we could get $7 million worth of business here. And they were only doing 12 at the time, right? So we could get this if we put their brand on it instead of ours. And they just wouldn't do it. So, and it was because they were just so eager to steal about their own brand.
That's what it is. Uncomfortable about letting go of the brand in a way.
So there were 3 of us who worked in that company, and one of them had actually been sacked, and he'd left and had a new baby on the way. And we were over at Stratty having a New Year's, and we're all shit-faced, right? So we're on the beach and go, why don't we just go? We're all bitching about this business model.
God, I hate working there.
Bitch about the business model, the boss. They're the 2 things that create great businesses.
Egos were ridiculous. And talking about, I had sales teams there, and there was I was bringing in so much business that there was a point where they're saying, well, we can't, you got to stop, you can't sell that. I'm like, well, what do I, what do I do?
You're capping me. Yeah.
Anyway, it was, and they weren't paying suppliers, and there was all sorts of issues. And I remember sitting there with Richie, my business partner, and I said to him, I feel really uncomfortable, right? It was just not congruent, and we're all having this conversation. We said, well, why don't we just go out and do it ourselves? So we did. So that was December discussion. March, we had the business going. We got every major, and within 12 months, we thought we had a business plan, and we thought we'd turn over, I think it was like 2 million or something in 3 years, and we did 7 million in the first year, and it just grew from there. So it was just from an issue with not feeling comfortable with that business,
it's hard
seeing
being
a
on the
different
front
business
line
model.
in sales when that's the situation you're in, because you
Yeah.
cop all the flack.
Yeah.
The CEO or shareholders, they got no idea what's going on. You're on the front line, knocking doors, building relationships, and then your personal brand's getting attacked.
Yeah, and they would choose what orders to ship and what not. And you see there, I didn't even have a proper answer, right? It just doesn't feel right. So that was the company. When we left, started E3, they tried to buy us 4 times. They couldn't afford us. At one point, he said, let's do a JV. And I went, completely different cultures, completely different business model.
We left for a reason.
Yeah. When I first left,
what was the resignation like, having 3 people? Did you
no. Well, so one of them they'd already sacked in December, so he'd been sacked. And then
But both of you were reps that left?
No, one was product. So Richie was in product.
Oh, okay, yep.
And I was in sales. So we both didn't feel comfortable where the business was going. We were having exactly the same conversation, walking into the directors at the same time, even walking, I remember coming up the hallway at the same time to go, this just isn't right, right? So it was really uncomfortable. And then we just went, well, let's just go and do it ourselves. So they did offer me a lot to stay. I remember having the discussion of like, it doesn't matter how much you throw at me. It's just not going to work. And even after we left, this director had rung and said, oh, we need to go and have a drink. And we went down to Gilhooley's at Chermside and he pulled out a checkbook. He's so fucking ego. And he pulled out this checkbook and he says, come on, Vanessa, how much do you want to get out of the industry? Like, mate, no. So it was just, I'll write it now. I've got lots of money. How much do you want? Just to get me out of the industry. So it was always a personal issue.
That'd be another box. I'm on the right path.
Yeah, exactly, right? If I needed anything. Exactly.
The perfect inspiration.
Yeah. And every time we walk
I would
into
grab that blank check and put it on the wall in the office. Let's go.
But it was a very personal thing. And we never, and I absolutely, ethics are huge for me. It was, we weren't going to compete and I never would compete against. And I said, we have to do something different. We've got to, I hand on heart. And they took us to court and all sorts of things to try and say that we copying, and we weren't. It all got through out and, we never did anything to compete. And it was always, and I always thought it's an old model anyway. Why would you, right? How do we advance it?
That fear of change. Like they didn't want to change and they couldn't see the value in it. And then you created the value in it. And then it's like, damn it, now we can't just sit on our laurels. We've got to actually make a change in our own business, which is when someone gets stuck in their business, the most painful thing. Yeah, especially when at the top.
The last offer to purchase, I mean, we go to an electronics show in Hong Kong and he said, look, let's meet at the airport. So we were sitting there and
with your old boss.
Yeah.
Still
so
there?
we would still catch up to say he'd ring me and go, look, we're cashed up and let's have a chat. We go, oh, let's have a chat. So you go and sit down and he'd throw a number out there and you go, we're fucking near it, right? So we were turning over more in EBIT. And they had been in business for 35 years. We've done that in 3 years, right? So it was just a better business model, less staff, easier. So they'd always offer to buy. And that last time I just said, just don't knock on the door anymore. It's just done. It doesn't work. The culture doesn't work for me. It wouldn't matter if the number was right. I couldn't see my team being able to work in there. And so that was the last time I said don't. And that's when they took the drastic measures to go. And then we found out through went the court case and they went through all the computers and forensic, on the phones and everything. This was going on. As soon as that happened, it was these phone calls with the teams. Approached 13 of my key staff, offered them basically blank checks to go and work there. It was ridiculous. Trying to, it got really, really dirty.
So
they did.
What were the first 3 months like? Was it like Bevan slattery, plastic chairs and plastic kind of like tables and stuff?
Trial desks.
No, we were... Richard had, it was a really dilapidated, what do you call, is that the word? Shitty.
Yeah. I love these setups.
It's a shit show.
So you want phone cords everywhere.
It was a unit that was going to be knocked
Awesome.
down.
Yes.
An old house.
That's
So
what you want.
unit. So we had this old house and we were in there and we had tables you bought off eBay. And at one point, even when I had my first Mikey come work with me, my assistant, and we were sitting across the table like this, sharing the table, right? So it was his computer there, mine there. And I remember being in there, we wouldn't buy Post-it notes because it was too expensive. So we just refused to buy Post-it notes. And we knew we made it when we could buy Post-it notes. And we had a friend of one of the business, Jill, one of my business partners, his mate worked at Schweppes. And I think it was Schweppes. Anyway, they did V's. Right? I love Red Bull now, but I used to drink V's. So he'd come in with all the cans that were damaged. So he'd come in with this crate. So we lived on V's. We had this little bar fridge. That was a tiny little fridge and all that was in there was V's. So we were chugging those down all day. And then it was really cold in this place and we were like, no, we're not getting a heater. It's too expensive. And one day Richard said, fuck it, we've got to go get one. It's too cold. So we went down. It was $20 at Kmart, right?
Of course.
We'd held out for 6 weeks.
That heaters have come a long way.
So it was, we did everything. And even to this point, we just don't waste money.
Yes.
Right? It's always.
It's got to have a justification.
Yeah. And I do, and this was this old company too. I remember we got a distribution agreement with Philips at one stage. And they came, it was us and them competing on this particular agreement. And he came to us and we were in this shitty old house. And they came to it. And I said, the reason I want you to see this is that we're not going to screw you over with margin, and the pricing and stuff. They took him out in a big yacht and sat there and said how he was bragging about this new Range Rover they're going to buy and all this stuff. So they came and gave us the contract because they knew we weren't going to do the wrong thing with customers and with them with screwing over with the money, right? So that was a big lesson for me. It didn't matter, even if you had shitloads of money, you shouldn't be flaunting it.
Yeah.
That's like Steve Jobs hide the Porsches.
Yeah.
Have you heard that story when they had investors coming? And they had 2 Porsches
Yeah.
out the front.
Yeah.
And he's told the boys, he's like, get them around the back. We got no money. And then they ended up getting a huge investment, way more than they ever would have.
Well, the company I bought, Companion, so it was a $90 million deal. When I bought that, there was, I remember the team, because I'm very much into the team, right? We've got they're the guts of it all. So I remember going and meeting with the warehouse. So it turned out that this business has been in operation for 30 years, barely ever saw the warehouse staff. That's a 20,000 square foot meter warehouse, huge, right? Never went there. The day they did, they drove up, and so 2 of the bosses turned up in Porsches and told them they couldn't give them $1 per hour pay rise. You know, what message are you sending them when you rock up with Porsches and go, sorry guys, we're not going to give you $1 each?
And
The second they leave, the culture's just been altered forever.
Yeah, and it
Imagine
did.
the
And they
lunchroom
remembered
table.
that story,
Yeah.
and that was a 10-year-old story. And they brought that up the first day I was in there, talking to them, going, what do you want to see, and how we're going to build this business and whatever. And that was something that stuck with them, right? So from that point, I said, I don't care if we're driving. I'm not going to drive around with a $200,000 car. It's bullshit. What could you put? I love putting that into business, or knowing that we've got another. How many families that you're providing for, right? Or creating something of value, of substance that's better than just kind of walking around in a hot car.
Well, I think that's something that, like, the real, if you will, recognize in other people is like someone who's started from nothing. If they see someone's second year in business and they're in a shoebox, that's inspiring to them. If anything, they're not like, oh, you're not even pretending that you've got more going on. You're doing exactly with what you can where you're at.
Yeah.
But it's when I get uncomfortable if I've met someone who's just in business, like, yeah, I just bought this new car, I'm doing this. I'm like, who did you borrow money off? Like, there's no way you made that much money that quickly.
Yeah.
You're definitely still like getting a handle on it. And then you've probably seen it. When you start projecting, you've got to maintain it, which is even more damaging. And like you said, like, where does the motivation come from? The motivation in the morning is like, do 20 hours just to keep paying the car payment. That can only last so long.
I have other business. I invest in other businesses and startups. I remember this girl walked in, and the rock and the jewelry, and she wanted money from me, and I'm like,
sell the ring.
yeah, right. Because I've worked that, right, and I've lost everything, and I've made it again, and all those things. So I'm looking at it, and at one point she was really cocky because the business model just wasn't sound, right? And I just said to her no, and nicely, but it was like, well, I'll just put my own money then. You should have in the first place, right? You don't go and get money off somebody else without having put your own money in, because that's telling me you're not confident in your own business model anyway, right? So I'm not going to put money in. You haven't put something in yourself. And you hear this stuff where, I've worked hard. And you're like, so you fucking should, right?
That's what happens, what you signed up for.
Yeah.
And what about leadership? You've had, like, that's my biggest downfall, or the biggest part to learn is leading teams, because I never managed anyone before starting a business. And it was a big eye-opener. I thought people just rock up and do what I do at work, but it doesn't happen that way. So, and you've seemed like you've done that from a very young age to have, 50 kids.
50 kids, yeah. That's probably the hardest team you've ever managed.
Life gets easier
if you
for
can manage 50 kids.
No wonder you're doing $90 million deals.
The rest has been, you're like, yeah, that was the hardest part of my life. Stealing lollies.
Candy apples. No, it always is.
How do you do it?
Well, it's
it
funny.
routine, discipline?
I had a girlfriend
emotion?
ring me the other day in another business, and she said, I just thought I had it. I thought I had the team nailed, and I thought all the HR stuff was done. I'm like, you're crazy, right? Because the next day it won't be. You're dealing with people and what's happening in there. They walk out that door. You don't know what happens at home, what's going on in their lives. Everyone's busy. Everyone's got stuff going on. And it does. My husband was ops manager in a couple of my companies. And so I'd say to him, like, you've got the lounge, right? So people go into your office, sit down and give you the stories, and they need the coaching. He'd help with that. But I think people need to know why they're there, direction, they're part of something, they're building something. That really helps with culture and leadership. And we're all on the same page, right? And my thing is, if you're unhappy, just don't be here. Go and you don't need it. I don't need it. No one needs it, right? Because it rubs off on everybody. And if it's not the right fit, and then go and find something that is. Because I want people that are happy, that want to turn up, that want to contribute. So we spend a lot of time with our teams. Culture it's paramount. We do a lot of collaboration. So even when each of the companies I've bought, probably over the last 7 years, everyone, I'll bring a team in and so integrate. So even with these, I had the last couple I did was 2 competitor companies, 30 years competitors. So mate, you could cut their air when they were in the rooms together, right? It was so the tension was horrible.
Like Queensland versus New South Wales.
It's shocking. So we ended up, pulling teams in and out. So one was in Melbourne and the other one's in Queensland, and bringing the teams up as much as possible and saying, right, I'm going to pull the warehouse team down there, bring them up, see how everyone works. You're all going to learn from each other and get best of breed from both. So that worked really well. We were able to, within a short time, so it was 3 months, we had 130 staff there. So being able to get a really good positive culture was really cool. And that's one of the things that they've all stayed in contact. And every time, I've had people who work with me for 20 years, right? So they follow me company to company.
Yeah.
And you've got to have that. We've seen them, married and have kids and relationships in and out. And, we always have partners at the Christmas parties and get together and we'll go camping. And, it's just they're there and they're giving you so much of their time that you need to be able to really know them. They're not just rocking up.
You can't pretend. Yeah.
No, it's got to be. And it is, I don't know, I always think I had a really shitty boss in the company I'd worked for. So
Just
it was
do the
really good to go, okay, what don't you want? So it was very, I explain a lot to the team as to why we're doing it. And the reason that is I don't want to give directions because someone will come up with a better way of doing it, right? If I said, this is what we want to achieve, here's what we've learned not to do, figure it out, on the way through.
And you put a lot of ownership on them to do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same point we do a lot of coaching, right? So we've got a business coach that comes in and it's, about communication and awareness and, ignoring your awareness. So we'd say we have these huge deals, right? If something's going to go wrong and you're doing 100,000 units of something, it's the one product, right? So if it's going to go wrong with one, you've got a potential of 100,000 units risk. And we're doing electronics, right? You don't want to burn someone or something happens. So I was saying anything that feels wrong, if you get an inkling that something's not right, you've got to voice it. And even if it becomes nothing, great. So we've always had that culture where it's not a blame thing or it's if it doesn't feel right, come and say it.
Solutions over problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And we learn, right? So we learn together. It's okay to make a mistake if we're trying. I think, if anyone thinks everything's going to be perfect 100% of the time, then they're kidding themselves.
Isn't the craziest thing, like I totally agree with that philosophy and I've taken it in my own business. And I've realized that you have to give the staff like the trust and they kind of build that with you over time. Because someone might have come from a previous job where the boss is like, we love being told what the problem is. And then how they react is always completely different to what they say. So you have to almost like Stockholm syndrome, talk them through. Mm-hmm. I want to know about the problems as soon as possible. And I want to know about problems in your job so I can fix them as soon as possible. And then we go, yeah, that's great. But until you show that to like another staff member who's been there longer and then they kind of witness it, then they'll begin to trust you.
Yeah, we in part of induction, right? So every new hire, I would still sit there in that first bit into a couple of hours and sit there and say, this is what I expect. And I expect that part of that would be you tell us, right? If something, we can't fix it. Our point of being here in business is to help someone, right? So if we're not honest in here and we've got an issue, that could affect our customer. We always talk about the ripple effect. So, if something goes out there, it could hurt our vendors, it could hurt our customers, it could hurt someone else in the team. Just voice it, right? So that's part of one of the things is bring it to me. I need to know what's going on. If I don't know, I can't fix it. I can't help you. We're very big about mental health, right? So we have mental health days. So if you just, I don't know, buggered, right? Take the day. I prefer you do that, come back recharged and sit there all day and drag through and then it becomes a problem for 4 days rather than it being one.
Yeah, and I think people and staff fester on things a lot more than business owners. Like you can say something and you don't think about it again, but they might take it on board and fester it over for days. And then some people, they're scared about losing their job because if they were outspoken at their previous company, then they get ridiculed or fired or, it's a dark path.
Yeah, but I think the other thing for us is that collaboration. It's always team stuff, right? So it's project-based. So you get the team together and sort of go, this is, work on it together. It's not on one person. And I think being open and honest where we've made mistakes and where I've made mistakes. I've been out there selling. They can't bullshit it, right? So, buyers change or something happens and, I've been there. I know exactly what you're going through, right? So it's not something that you need to hide it because I know what those conversations can be like and I know how to have those difficult conversations from the other side or whatever. So it's a lot easier, I think, because we have done it. So I think the entrepreneurs, the best leaders, the ones who have worked up through the company and understand all aspects of it. So I think, the best leaders understand that, what's happening in the product or sales or whatever, you have a full kind of overview of what's going on. So they come to you with a problem. It's not like, I don't understand it, so I don't want to know about it. You know, or you want to know how to help and get through that.
And how did you get a business coach? Because I know everyone's a life coach, everyone's a business coach now, that most of them haven't even run a business.
Yeah, I hate that. Yeah. So I love sharing ideas with entrepreneurs. That's different. We've got, VacuUL, so UL Partners, brilliant. So I think maybe 2002 I first used him. So it was, he completely changed the way I led, and I was very much into, I was a power salesperson. I was a gun at doing what I was doing and smashing sales and things for the other company I worked for. And at one point they said, look, we want the rest of the team, the sales team, to do it. And I didn't know how to lead because protectionism is there, that you kind of go, well, if they're good, then I just risk my job, right? So the mindset there was, if they're good, you know, you bring him with you, you're all better, right? And you're stronger, and that whole team thing came into play, and that's when I ended up leading the whole team. And the difference in the way that I approached leadership, and when it was particularly, you know, my own turf and what I was doing, what I was good at, didn't become a threat anymore, right? So it was using him to kind of work through it and say, get everybody up and all go quicker, and all, you know, it helps the whole team. So it was very much really helpful for me in terms of leading the teams, and particularly from an executive point. That was a game changer. And so I get him in, you know, with my teams. Every time I've got a new company and I've got my leadership team, I get him in to say, just talk. So we're talking the same language, right? So we say, just language, like it'll be, I've got chatter, right? So instead of coming and going, I've got an issue, or I've got chatter, right? I've got chatter, and everyone goes, okay, good, voice it. And it's not a confrontational thing.
It's a discussion.
Yeah, and everyone goes, okay, good, stop. You know, you're not busy doing something. You go, okay, well, what do you need help with, right? Or what is it? How can I help? So it's just this language. Everyone goes, you know, even opinions, right? There's a thing he says, some people will get their opinion. He'll have a piece of paper and he'll show people and go, you know, a lot of people will just stand on it, go, it's my opinion, or put it under your arm and go, that's it. So, you know, tearing that up and saying everyone has their opinion and understanding that. So how do you pull all that out and then come out with the best solution? So it's just the language thing and the communication. I think he's brilliant. I wouldn't get a coach in business unless it's other bigger business people that you can learn from, and particularly their mistakes, right? That's so different.
Yeah, it's crazy, just like even in the last 40 years of corporate, just how much it's evolved. Because you're so right about the lead salesperson. That mentality has been like, well, I do $1 million in sales and everyone does $200,000 in sales. I'm the best. But what if everyone did $1 million or even 800,000 and it came back a bit, but the group as a collective did better?
Yeah. And it makes the whole sales job easy, right? Because now you own the market.
Yeah.
So you go, easier to sell.
Everyone's doing half deals. It's all happening.
Yeah, it's good.
What made you?
Sales wheel is so hard. Managing sales wheel is going to be the hardest job.
Oh, the egos.
Yeah.
And terrible with detail. Right?
Yeah.
Most salespeople are just shocking with detail. They can talk, but they're just. And I'm very detailed, and I love process. And
I got a deal coming in. Have you called them yet? No, but it's coming.
I love it when they walk in going, oh, the hairs. He used to have this sales guy, and he'd say, oh, there's the hairs on my arms are standing up. I was so excited. I'm like,
is the invoice paid?
Yeah. I'd be like, wait, we've still got.
Haven't sent the invoice yet.
And I'm really not super excited
because you know how much is left. We haven't even done the job yet.
We've only just started.
Yeah.
When they pay, and actually for me, it's even past that. I'm going.
Yes.
When it's in store and it's sold through and the customer's happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The salesperson gets their comms, but you're still on the line for everything else involved.
So there's that lead time for us is, say 7-8 months.
I find that interesting, the chatter thing. How do you avoid, and this is something I experienced. So previously last year in 2019, around halfway through the year, I had like a team of like 11 to 12 people. And I found that it was too much for me to handle at once. Yep. Also being the main salesperson, also trying to project manage every project as well. So now we're back down to like 4 staff, which I can manage a lot easier. How do you stop the like being the inviting boss, but then you have people that just want to ask you questions for the sake of asking questions because you open that door?
Yeah.
And it's like they're not problem solving for themselves anymore. They're like, I can use Tom's brain to solve my problems, but I probably could have worked this out on my own, or come with like 2 solutions and what should I do? Yeah,
we encourage that.
Yeah.
So the encouraging they come in with a solution.
Yeah.
And I would push that back to them and go, what do you think we should do, right? So what are the options? And even if they say this is what can't be done, at least, okay, we knocked that out. What can be done? So I think, and I have that challenge because people like to work with me.
You got emails, your phone's going off, and no one knows like how many people are talking to you at once. And it's like having that many different conversations, that many different people. And you don't get angry when they walk up, but you're just like, whoa, I've got to like now switch my brain a completely different direction to like address this issue, which isn't even really an issue.
Yeah, and I think it's where I have teams working together, so I'd pop in and out of those. That's so much easier. So you're saying, okay, you guys are going to work on that project, and there might be a team of 5 or 6 or whatever. You're bumping your head into that to go, okay, everything on track. What do you need? What do I need to know? And then they'd have that discussion of voice. But I think we've always had the open door policy, but I think people know not to take advantage of it. And they know you're busy. And I think us sharing what we're working on and people seeing that is another thing. And I think it's important for the team to understand your workload. To say, I had an EA once who was really anal. So he would sit there and go, no, 5 minutes on.
You shall not pass.
And you're like, I'm not that busy.
And she'd hate it because I was like, yeah, come on.
I didn't realise how tough EAs are until we started inviting people.
Yeah.
No.
I felt like I got interrogated the other day. She's like, she wanted to know. She's like, what the hell is this about? Because he's agreed to it, and I want to know what you're going to questions you're going to ask. I'm like, I'm not going to try and catch him out. I'm just, I don't know. Like
she was, guys make it up as we go.
Yeah. I thought I was confident on the phone, but she was like, there better be nothing sus about this. Like, I want to know everything that's going on in this meeting. And I was like, whoa,
what's he hiding?
Yeah, I think I think tools, right? So for us, it's Trello. I love Trello. So I have boards for every company, even
that's Atlassian's,
Bravehearts.
Is it? Yeah.
But that's a free tool, right? So if anyone uses it, you don't have to pay because you get around a fine, and I use it for all my companies. Even we've got one at home for the kids, so it's different boards, and then having everything on there. And so we would have everyone understanding if a new project comes in, we would actually even to the point of color coding it, and then at the top of that board or that list go, that's the priority, right? So we would have there's always conflict because we have so many projects going on at once. But if they both came in both the same timeline, I don't want everyone kind of static going, oh shit, which one do I do first? And they do nothing, right? So it would be, if at all you're concerned, I'd be looking through that board at night, and sit there and go, okay, that's the number one thing, right? And then it goes in order. So everybody knows that's a focus. So get that nailed. If you have a conflict, we've got a timeline. We know what the timelines are. If you're asking someone to do a task, we're sitting there saying, okay, we can do that by Wednesday, and they're agreeing to it. And we have the managed by agreement kind of rule within our offices. I don't want you to tell me you can do it by Wednesday if you can't, right? Because you're going to let everybody down. So it's, can you get it done by Wednesday? And then we'd go through it, or they'd say, yeah, fine, I'll do that. But then I expect it to be done then. So it's very much, you don't commit to or agree to do that timeline if you can't meet it. Because then I'll go and commit to somebody else going, yeah, we'll have that Wednesday, and then I'll look like a dick.
Yeah. There's a ripple effect. Yeah.
I find it so interesting, the staff thing. Like the best thing I had in our business was like one of the people that worked with us was like friends with everyone in the office, and then he could bring secret issues to me, and then without directly acknowledging them, I could solve them. And then people go, oh, it's so good to work here. Like this is all happening and this is solved. But that to me, I was like, wow, that's like something I've never had access to before. But they are involved in the business as you are, so they want to bring the issues to you. Yeah. And then sometimes the smallest things, like there's people just get caught up on the smallest things, like, oh, it's ridiculous I have to do this job, or it's ridiculous that this happens.
Yeah, and if you don't know, you can't fix it, right?
Yeah,
so
100%.
I spend more time at our sales conferences saying, in a boardroom with all the staff going, what's not working? Because we'll find a solution there or make something better, right? I want to know that more than what's going gangbusters, because that's already working. What can we fix, or what can we do better at?
Did you find like you had like a ceiling where you like hit, because definitely for me, like that 10 staff, I just remember how stressful it was, and that's probably like my glass ceiling in a way where I may break through it eventually, but just thinking back on it, I'm like, it was a horrible experience, even though it might have been a good one. Did you have that at all where you felt like you hit a limit? Or
yeah, and I had to. It was other people telling me that, right? So I needed to, particularly with the bigger teams and going across countries when I was leading, my teams in Hong Kong and US and UK and, Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, the challenge there was, I think it got to about 7 direct reports, and I keep that now as 7 is the maximum, because you just can't spend the time with them. You're doing them a disservice too, right? So it's those direct reports of 7 of them. But then I make sure that the key people know what I would say, I wouldn't say, or what we do accept or don't accept. Everything's really clear, so they can make decisions without me being there. If I walked away from the businesses and I'm not there for months on end, it still ticks. They know why we're in business. They know what our main objective is. That's really key, I think, and then they can make the decisions themselves and not be scared to make the wrong one or kind of not move forward. I want them to be able to work 24 hours a day, whatever time. I don't mean 24 hours a day. It'd be awesome.
Oh, we're great. We're working towards that.
So that's the secret.
Never leave.
Yeah, no, holidays? What are they? No, I think they need to know what they can and can't do, right?
Yeah.
And then that makes it easy. But definitely it is hard with the bigger team.
I think what I'm picking up though is that you're just saying it's piece by piece. Like you roll out your process over time, you perfect them, and then you just kind of get better at addressing the issues. And by the sounds of it, you've like left enough mental space to think about these problems and again, solve them even better.
Yeah.
Like you're not run off your feet with like on the phone trying to take back-to-back sales calls and then manage the business simultaneously.
And one of the key things, and particularly with these, like even these 30-year-old very successful companies, but they wouldn't, you couldn't get any truth to a lot of things, right? So because everyone's so busy covering their ass on everything, or emailing, CCing in 10 people. You've just made every 10 people stop and read that email. So even the point for us to communicate and say, unless someone's got an action there, don't email them, right? So because otherwise you're stopping them. Or we do meetings and you have 20 people there and you go, you do understand. At one point I had to sit there with the team and say, this just cost us 20 grand for this meeting. You know what we need to do in sales for that, right? For GP, not just the sales. So how much we need to sell to get that. So explaining that, they're like, oh.
But is that new world, like you're saying, like if someone doesn't want to be there, you want to know about it so you can either give them another opportunity in somewhere else, because we're all seeing that trend of the work from home and the schedule your email at 8 a.m. and, hey, look, I'm at work, guys, I've started. But being able to pick up, because I think I feel similar to you where like if someone's not happy in the job, you want nothing more for them to find the job they're happy in. And it exists out there. And it may be whatever the situation is that they kind of sign up for a role that they weren't qualified for or whatever it may be, and they're not enjoying as much as they thought they would. You want them to find what it is that they enjoy, because there's nothing worse for the human soul than pretending. Yeah. Like, hey, I'm at work, 8 a.m., there's my scheduled email, and now I've got to pretend to do things all day. Yeah. The worst.
Well, it's interesting too. You get to know what people are good at. So I remember we had a KPIs meeting with one of the my assistant at the time. I said to him, he was so good as my assistant, but I knew he needed more. Right, and I knew I'd lose him otherwise, so you have to give him something. And so I said to him one day, look, what do you want to do? He said, I want to do sales. And he's so not sales. But in the end, I said to him, and I knew he'd be really good with the product side of it. So moved him into product. I said, why don't you try that? And he ended up then leading the whole product team. Loves it. And so he's huge in that space now and working in Hong Kong and China and Australia. And but that was understanding too, when you're looking at a team and understanding what their strengths are when they are getting bored, or to be able to say, we were fortunate enough to be able to have other positions or be able to move them in the company. I prefer to do that, have the right person in the company, right mindset, get a job to fit that rather than trying to find someone to fit the job.
100%. They're the easiest people to upskill. If they're keen, hungry and love working there and you can keep offering them more, then yeah.
Well, he started in the warehouse.
Yeah.
So he was packing boxes in a warehouse and then came in as
best,
EA.
They
and
understand
then,
everything all the way through.
Yeah.
And they're like you said, no ego. It's like, I've started here, I'm just grateful to even be doing this now. But they give it that. It's all about energy. Like you can pretend to work 8 hours a day, but you can get a solid amount of work out in an hour if you're focused and I've got this meeting coming up, I really need to get this done. You'll get through it lightning quick.
I'm very flexible with times and things, because I just think I'd prefer to have someone in there 4 hours going gangbusters than 8 hours wasting half of it.
Yeah.
So if you can get your work done, we've got these timelines and you can do it in an hour, great, go home. So, as long as we've all agreed and that's not holding anyone up, then just get it done. If it takes you, but if you've overcommitted and you've agreed to that timeline, it's going to take you 10 hours, well, you're going to need to do that. So it's understanding, respecting that that's the project is worth more. And I don't care how long it takes them in terms of, if they get it done quicker, or I'm not, in there from 8 to 5 type of person. It's, some people work better in the morning, some are better in the afternoon. Mikey, we used to joke around, he'd grunt at you before 10 o'clock, right? So you go, just don't even start till 10. Come in later. But he was awesome at night.
Had you always had that philosophy?
Yeah.
All the way through?
Yeah, and because I remember, and this is working for that other company too, was I walked in one day and I was the biggest salesperson and he walked in and I said, it was 8:05 or something. And he just ripped me a new one and said, if you walk in at 5:05 and everyone else thinks they are, and I'm like, well, when everyone else is here at 10 o'clock at night like I am.
I had the exact same thing. Yeah.
I'm like, then I'm happy to have that conversation.
Yep.
But it stuck with me and I thought, that is just bullshit. And I couldn't help it anyway. I was always early, always there latest, always worked through lunch.
Time.
Yeah, and it was just so inappropriate for that. And then from that point on, it was a good lesson for me, because the team, I said, I don't give a shit.
You knew how it made you feel.
Yes.
So you don't want to call someone out when they are like staying back till 10, but they rock up 5 minutes later. You're like, am I even appreciated? But it's such a small passing comment.
Well, And it's a respect, right? So I've always said the thing, I had one of my team the other day, she had a mum in hospital, so she was, taking some time. She's like, oh, Ness, I need to take some time. I'm like, but you'll make it up. I don't care, right? So I care, but I'm saying I don't mind. So it's that thing of trusting them. And if you've got a bigger problem, right? If you're worried about someone being in there 5 minutes late or that they're wasting half the day, they just shouldn't be there, right? You're missing that. That's the bigger issue, saying it's the wrong fit. So I don't, it's trusting that
there's a big disconnect because business is all results based. Yet the 8 till 5 thing is not results based. That's time based.
Yep.
So we've virtually created this world where we're all going against each other.
Yeah.
It seems crazy when you think about it.
Good point. True.
Jeez.
Solving the problems here.
Right, that's it. Everyone works 3 hours a day.
results.
Just do podcasts in the middle of the day and everything will make sense.
Yeah. So what are you going to go to next?
Yeah.
You're sold out of adventure operations.
So I've started Simpli Sourcing. So Simpli, we're doing a lot of custom merch, gift with purchase. So the challenge I've had, so every
Is that your passion
business,
or is that you just
I
know
love
it
products,
works?
right?
What's your favourite products?
Oh, all right. We do millions of products. So it's,
Yeah,
I
your
just love
company does.
whatever's new.
Yeah, okay.
So it is, if you're ever having a shit day, I go and like, what samples we got, right? Go and open up something.
Go try some stuff.
Yeah.
Stop opening all the samples.
It's every iteration is where always, when you said earlier about, process and kind of working and getting things better, and it's always a continuous improvement phase, right? So we always work through that to say what's next. So when I look at new business models, I'm going, okay, well, what was working there? What could we change? And one of the challenges with the sourcing over the last 20 years was the quantities, right? So if you wanted your own brand on something, you'd have to order, we were ordering 3,000 units or 10,000 units or something. So we really cracked that with the factories to be able to get that down to 100. You're still getting things from China, a lot from Australia now. We're sourcing a lot locally, which is a huge shift because everything was China-based. So we were able to do that. And what it means is there's a lot of smaller business. So I've got a huge amount of network with other entrepreneurs and business owners. You're saying, particularly with COVID, was going, if your revenue's down, how do you save money? And without losing headcount, because if you can help it, you don't want to lose that team for that minor, short-term period anyway, and you could lose them forever. So it was, let's look at your costs of doing business and what could we save money on with doing that. But the MOQs were always, restrictive with that. So being able to crack that now, we can get 100 units that's got your own, merch, and it's cheaper, way cheaper than using a promotional company. So you're getting the bulk pricing that, the majors or the corporates would be used to, but you're doing smaller units.
So what's the process? Like, are you guys designing the products or you're sourcing them from?
This one's mainly sourcing,
Yep.
But we do design too. So there's a lot of product development. My background and for the last 20 years has been product development, so actually tooling product and creating product.
Is that
we still
ultimately
do
where
that.
you want to ultimately get to that stage with everything, or it's hard? It's just
No,
depending on demand.
No,
Yeah.
and it's costly, and it's now it's speed. So it's more about, we used to go and you tool a new product and you headphone or whatever, and it costs you 20 grand to tool it. It takes 12 months. It's too slow now. So you need to use and pick up whatever's working and a tool that's right. So it's a lot of it is sourcing. There's a huge amount of sourcing, stationery, tech, apparel, homewares.
So then you sell that to the majors.
So majors, corporates, Westpac, EY.
So these little companies, they could be small operators. They've
Yes.
created the product, and then you can take their business and boom.
Yep.
That'd be pretty rewarding.
Yeah, it is, right? And
Yeah.
and I love this now because we get to work with a lot more of the smaller businesses. So being able to help them find and,
They'll get sales that never even knew they could get.
No, even give with purchase. You normally, a girlfriend of mine owns an online retailer, and she wanted to give with purchase. So she's doing fashion, clothing. We were able to give her these wireless chargers for your iPhones. So, it's something of perceived value of $80 and she's paid, $5 for it. So, but it's a hot product. And so it really helped with the promotion because the sales skyrocketed because spend this much, get this. But it's a cool product to get, not just a bag or something.
So then, are you using the experience from the previous companies that you've created, like the sales team, then to market these products to, like you're saying, EY? Well, those maybe relationships you've already got, but then to market it to new business? Is that the idea?
Yeah. So this is up until 12 months ago, it was all major retail, right? So it was working with Bunnings and Kmart and JB Hi-Fi and Target and those guys. Now it's more corporates and small business. So working with them, and it's become harder with the retailers because they've got their own sourcing offices and doing it themselves anyway. So we were only ever going to be there for a short term. Now it's moving into that more accessible space, and it's a whole different customer base. So it's so different to what I've done for the last 20 years, but they are people I know. And so that helps, right? Because you open the door straight away and they know the track history of, we know product. We know how to source properly. We know how to get, audited factories. We know how to get eco. Yeah, we've got compostable mailer bags, right? So it goes completely compostable and at home. Those things are really cool products, and every business should have it. It shouldn't just be limited to the majors that can do 10,000. So that's it. It is quite rewarding, right? To work with these other smaller businesses and say, okay, how do we make this smarter, more efficient, more eco-friendly? That's cool.
And then have you built relationships in like China or yeah? So did you like travel over there?
Yeah, a lot.
And you've like
I had an office in Shenzhen.
Really?
Yeah.
Amazing.
So and Hangzhou. So I was in China probably 4 times a year, but my team were in every 6 weeks on off. So we'd bring the Australian team up, but we also had the team based in China. So, and now we probably deal with about 70 factories. So they're all audited, ethical sourcing. So there's no child labour, all that sort of stuff, which still is rampant in China. So we've got years of relationships though. So a lot of these factories we've worked with for 20 years.
Yeah, it's hard for a dropshipper to just jump in.
When you went over there for the first time, you're like, whoa, where do I start?
I love China. I love China. I love Hong Kong. It's just so cool.
What's your view on what's happening at the moment?
Look, everything from a trade point of view, everything's back to normal. Right?
Yeah,
and it was
because the relationships
March.
are with the businesses, not the politicians.
Yeah. And I think it's very naive to pick a battle with China because they're our biggest trading partner. And I think, I don't know who prefer to deal with US, right? So if you had the two, I'd go China. But they're really helpful. I find a lot of people are scared of China and, worried that they're going to rip off our designs and, all this IP thing, theft. And, they are so helpful, right? If you need something, and it's the best networking you'll ever do because they'll sit there and you'll talk to someone and say, oh, look, I'm looking for this widget or something. If they don't know or they don't have it, they'll find someone for you. Right? So it's that thing of explaining, and telling everyone that you meet, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I want, this is the quantity I'm after, and then they all run off and do it. It's awesome.
It is amazing. And like obviously products are cheaper and it's easier to like source and stuff. Do you worry about like, I guess that kind of like it's cheap manufacturing and stuff, but the long-term play of like China, more the government side, like how they're like financing kind of islands around them and stuff. Like I know that they've had like some run-ins with like our politicians and bribes and whatever else. But of course the US has played that game for the longest time. It's only now China's like catching up. But how do we, I guess, address that in a way, or is it something that's just kind of...
Look, I mean, Leanne Kemp and I were talking about this on a LinkedIn Live a couple of weeks back and talking about manufacture, right? So I would absolutely, hands down, buy more stuff in Australia. And we are transitioning a lot of our products. So about 40% of our gear at the moment it was all China, right? 100% of that. About 40% now is Aussie. And we would love to do more. I was talking about that and how I work with the government on how do we get more manufacturing happening here. Because in tech, you just can't, right? There's a couple of battery factories, but that's about it. I can't get lithium batteries. I can't get cables. I can't get anything that's hardware. So plastic tooled product, really difficult here. Costs are prohibitive. And it's nice to say, and I love these articles. It makes me go nuts when you see things on Facebook and everyone goes, oh, it's cheap shit from China. Or like, well, don't shop it. But they love Kmart,
It's gotten really good, yeah.
So they sit there and say, and almost 100% of everything in Kmart is China. So anyone who believes otherwise, and they're usually the most vocal because they'll say, oh, I want to buy stuff from China. And you're like, well, you are. Right? There's just about everything in retails from China. So until we can get, and if I look at, a headphone, we've got 30 widgets in it, 30 pieces of componentry, we can't get it here. Physically impossible to get it here. And, Leanne and I were talking about there's all this hype around COVID and the mask factories. And I go, where do you think the raw materials came from? China. That's awesome that someone's putting that stuff together here, but basically you're assembling it, right? Everything came from China. So we are so far behind in manufacturing, it's not funny. And I think it's great, the incentive.
Is that the wage that's created that?
Yeah, I think it originally would have been. And then there's just been no incentive. So it's great to see that plan now in the budget to say they're going to put that, $1.5 billion into manufacturing. The challenge is I think the government will go out the wrong way and you get some, it's
That's not like them at all.
Just throw some money at it and fix it. So half of it will go into projects that won't, come off the ground. But wage is always an issue, right? Transport's an issue. I can get stuff from China here cheaper than I can get it from here to Melbourne. So that's the challenge, right? As much as we've got these cars going around the street, our proximity as a country and shipping stuff around is very expensive. I can't send some of our bulky gear up even to North Queensland. It's just too expensive. It's more to freight it than it is to sell the product. So that's always going to be a challenge. So until we address those sorts of things, I think we're about 10 years away from being a decent manufacturing, but we have to move that way. So, and we'll move with it. And as much as we can support local business to get more manufacturing, we will. Right? And I do a lot with R&D and a lot of working with a lot of innovators and companies to help them to try and work out the best way to do it here. But we're nowhere near able to do it at the moment.
So what's going to change over 10 years? Because won't our wages go up as well and we'll just be on the same rat race?
It's robotic, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to have to go.
Robotics is the only way we're going to do it.
Well, you're going to have to, right? Because wages, you're right, wages will continue to go up.
And no one wants to do that job per se. We've both worked factory type jobs before, and you are just mentally stuck. Like you finish the task, it's so easy. You move one thing from one place to the other. You can only be so mentally occupied in that. The rest of it's just your thoughts about, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this job? I don't want to be here. Someone else next to you is complaining because they've been there for 20 years more than you. It's a pretty hard environment to stay motivated in.
Yeah, and I think even with that, so even the like from a business, a deeper level is the insurances that go along with that, and workers' comp, and super. All those other add-ons still are very expensive. Yeah,
Increasing the cost of the product.
Yeah. So and at the end of the day, it comes down to that. But the robotics. I mean, we used to sit there when I first started my electronics companies. People would sit there and hand solder PCB boards, right? So the electronics now they're all printed. It's actually printed out of a machine. It's not even a robot trying to put it together. This stuff just comes out on slats.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more efficiencies there. And China is just so far ahead. The factories we work with, Foxconn, and they work with Apple, and they are just all over. Their robotics and the engineering side of it is incredible.
Have you heard of Andrew Yang in the States?
No,
He's like a tech entrepreneur, but he talks about the kind of foreseeable problem that he sees coming, which is going to be with automation and with all these kind of automated jobs. What's going to happen with like the excess people that are kind of displaced from work and don't have income? Have you heard about like universal basic income and those kind of things?
Yeah, but then, I mean, particularly in Australia, we have education, right? So we have access to, and everyone, internet even. So we have fantastic internet. We can learn, we can reskill, we can, what we need to do as a country is look at how do we use our minds better in designing, engineering, developing products.
And exporting whether it's internet things or solar or I totally agree.
It's just different skill sets.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's no different to if someone said back in, the 50s or 60s that manufacture wouldn't be like that. Everyone would have really shot you and said that wasn't going to happen. It did. Everything evolves.
Yeah, what happened to all those people making cars?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to reskill.
Do you think the government's making enough to focus on? Because I know they've just like kind of talked about, I don't know if they've confirmed it yet, but they're going to invest in some of these like oil and gas projects and whatever else, which feels quite like chaotic and backwards for like the talk about, yes, change is painful, but what an opportunity to kind of make a massive change in like the right direction for like the long term. Like even it's almost laughable, like copper's fine. We'll just use copper wires for the internet because why would you need to download more than 10 megabits per second anyway? COVID hits, God, it'd be nice to have great internet for everyone working from home, and the situation's changed. We're going to roll out the NBN and finish it off. It almost seems like predictable, but I guess they're driving this huge ship. They must be just so hard to.
But this is the challenge where you have, the terms that we have in government, because they've got to make as much impact. It's short, again, and when you're talking about counterproductive before, it is really counterproductive because you're saying, okay, you've got your term and you've got to jam as much in, remembering there's probably 12 months of that by the time they're bloody rallying on the way in and the way out. So the really effective time's only, 2 years? They've got to make an impact in that time to prove they're worthy of the next one, and they're worried about the votes the polling every week.
It takes 2 years just for a salesperson to prove their worth.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So you're after short term, but we're thinking we need as a country that stability, that long term setup, and that's another thing. Like with China, they're so forward thinking.
Well, they have don't they have like a yearly meeting where it's like, what's our economic plan for the next 4 years or whatever it is, and it's like how you'd want to run a business almost. Like it's so structured that you're like, what the hell are we all doing? Like,
she'll be right.
It's true. Yeah, it's counterproductive.
Do your kids have TikTok?
No, well, they did, and now no.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's such a good app.
I know.
In a terrible way.
It's funny, but then
It's like it's wired straight into your dopamine receptors, and you're just like, you can't get off it.
Well, that's my kids with YouTube.
Yeah. But the algorithm is so strong now. Like, it recommends things you didn't even know you were interested in. And it's like, how did it know I'd find this funny? Like, it's the algorithm of those ones. Like, and now they're not even controlled by people anymore. Like, they're influenced by the algorithm itself, making decisions to be like, what's the best thing to recommend to the user next? Keep them on for like the ad viewership and everything else.
But everyone's wigging out about social media. Pokey's been doing this for years. Everyone's been doing it for years.
Yep.
Like, it's just common sense.
Or data.
Even where you put products in a shelf on Woolworths is there for a certain reason.
Oh, we can tell you exactly return on inch, right, on a store, and we know exactly what's going to sell better because of the location. It doesn't even matter what the product is. So they know iHeight's by height and where it sits, and there's data on everything. We've been doing that for years. We were looking at trending. We were always looking at trending, shopper trends and how they buy and why they use it. And this is never. It's not. You're right. It's not new. Been doing that forever.
But everyone's wigging out.
Well, I think when you're older, you work it out. But as a kid, you're really susceptible to falling into the traps of, God, everyone on social media is driving a Lamborghini. Where's my Lamborghini? And there is a bit of that. And I think if you don't have like purpose or direction, you actually get sucked more into the, I don't understand how the world works. Maybe I stuffed up versus, oh, that's 10 years of packing shelves into meeting someone, into starting a business together, into creating an amazing brand. And then you're looking at their highlight reel. And I think when you're young, it's super easy for people to kind of like even your kids on TikTok, you don't even know the effects it's having because it's moving so quickly. Like, how the hell are you meant to stay up to date with what platform does what now? But I couldn't believe, from a user using TikTok, you just keep getting prompted to the next video and you've spent an hour watching 10-second videos.
Yeah.
What does that do to your attention span? Like, it can't be good.
Well,
like,
this is why everyone's watching TV series, right? You can't watch a movie anymore. It's too long.
We don't have the attention. Yeah.
That short fix.
Have you watched Quibi?
Quibi?
Yeah.
No, I haven't heard of it.
What's Quibi? They do the 7-10 minute kind of slots for a series. They're awesome because you can sit there like, I suppose the idea is if you're waiting somewhere, you're in a bus or whatever, a transit, that you've got that sort of 7 to 10 minute series.
So it keeps you engaged.
Yeah, and it's quick, right? So you're just getting but they jam a heap of story into that 10 minutes.
Well,
cool.
even Spotify has realized, the artists that post on Spotify have realized if they can't get like a hook or keep the track really short, the attention span of the users is low, hence the times of songs have been getting reduced because they need that exposure. They need to have a soundbite that gets used on TikTok or Instagram, whatever it may be. It's changing the whole world of content. And then at the same time, long forms are becoming really popular.
Yeah.
Because people who are going, I'm sick of sound bites and being told agendas. I want to have a full discussion where I can hear every point in length and then decide and make an opinion based off that.
Well, it's, even, and my husband and I were talking about this yesterday about, I had another podcast thing I was on, and they, you had 3 questions to answer. It's supposed to be how you help other businesses with the international expansion. So I'm trying to jam 25 years of experience in 3 questions in a 5-minute video. How do you do that?
Great clickbait though.
Okay, that's a challenge, right? So we're going, okay, which angle do you go out with this? It is better to go on a longer, and I love having when I'm on panels and you get an engaged audience and saying, I hate the speakers that just stand on a podium and just talk their story. You want to engage. What do they want to know? What's important for you to know? What can I help you with when you walk out of this room? I mean, you don't need to hear my story 20 times over, the same thing or routine. It's just, let's have a discussion. I love that kind of thing where it's
I think
helping.
I think that's honestly where we're going with politics and everything as well. Like, I think the era of Trump has highlighted just how messed up things are. And
you think?
And I think Australian politics maybe are a bit boring compared to the States. But even the fact that we got to have someone like Robbie on here and who's open to doing that, I was like, if this is going to start becoming normal, then other politicians will be held accountable that we want to hear their views in long form as well.
Yep.
Like, give us the real version of you. Show us what you want to do.
They're pretty logical.
Yeah, they are. And that's what you're right. That's what you need to know. I mean, Rob Mollick, LMP, and he's the whip. He's on our Bravehearts board. So I'm chair of Bravehearts. And he's on the board. And to know him and to talk to him, and then what you see in media is completely different, right?
2 different people.
Yeah. And it's to, you really get him and you have a whole different kind of perspective on what they're trying to do because you're understanding the whys, and how they're going to get there. I mean, it's great to everyone throw out an idea and go, this is what's going to happen. But without execution, it's
nothing.
Just an idea, right?
Well, COVID even showed me, like, when politicians are somewhat honest, how much backlash they get. Like, when Scott Morrison's like, we're going to lock down, we're going to do this, just people freaking out and stockpiling stuff, you go, oh, they're managing a lot. You're like, I actually have always been like, why can't they be more transparent? Why can't they be more honest to the public? But there is that half of the public that maybe just one news cycle to the next. Yeah, frenzy. And then things do go crazy and society starts to collapse and you go, I didn't actually realize how much they're managing. Like what they say is really important.
Yeah, that's right.
Is your work with Bravehearts, that seems very heavy. Like I've got an 18-month-old daughter and, you hear about abductions have gone up massively through COVID.
Yep.
Like that must be some crazy work.
Well, and I think the stats, I mean, Hetty started this, through her own journey with her daughter, 30 years ago. So this is, the stats are still 1 in 5 kids, right?
Yeah, it blew my mind.
Sexually
when I was looking at it
abused.
this morning.
Yeah, by the time they're 18. So it's still nowhere near enough work, and it's a topic no one wants to talk about. So it's more important that we do and say we got to put this, and get
Look
out
at the
there
Jeffrey
and talk.
Epstein situation.
That's just ridiculous. And then the list of people
I
involved
know.
in that.
And how it's been handled, just everything.
Well,
Everyone's quiet.
and the challenge, so even with social media, we're finding the differences. So the idea, people were always aware of, the kind of weirdo down the street, and, they
At the
always
park,
said
if you're not with the kids.
or old, Uncle John who's a bit kind of weird, stay away from him. Or it's not that anymore, right? So we're finding we had that massive, thing with Westpac. They were funding videos online, and that's live, right? So that's not even a video replayed. Every single one of those was actually happening at that time. So, when you see that, so the sexually abused, so they were putting the funds through, and they knew. So the challenge was, and Hetty.
Westpac were putting the funds through. For
They were
people to
letting
buy
them
the content.
transacting the funds.
Yeah, without really like flagging them like they should have, and they have like all the accountability in place to do that. But it was
Lucky I don't bank with Westpac.
Well, their CEO's gone, right?
they're our sponsor of the day.
I like Westpac.
Have your accounts closed by the end of the episode.
Well, we had to move our accounts at the time. We moved our accounts with Bravehearts from Westpac.
Oh, that was a few years ago.
No, this was only last year.
Wow.
So, and it's still going to this year, but the CEO's gone. Right?
How
So
ironic that stuff happens. Your accounts with Bravehearts is with Westpac and that.
Yeah, but now they've done the right thing. So the board have done the right thing. The new CEO's done the right thing in that they're actually now training their staff on what to look for. So Braveheart's helping with that to say, how do we use that to change that? So a lot of it was naivety, and just understanding the impact that had and does have. But, we're finding the challenge now is kids offending on kids. So we have a Turning Corners program where it's training. There's a lot of kids assaulting kids.
I heard, is it like the analogy I heard was like vampire, like that if someone's like sexually assaulted, then they can then to unintentionally in this way do it to someone else. Like one kid's been hurt and then he wants to hurt another kid, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's just rehabilitating that. So we've got to work on both sides there because you've got to help that child as well as the victim or the survivor, we call it. So it's, you're looking at both sides because if you don't break that cycle, and generally a lot of that, it stems back from their own child abuse that they offend later. So, we need to look at, and this is where the education part comes in. I love working with Bravehearts with, they've got a Ditto program going into schools and kindies and things where it's age appropriate, teaching them what's their areas and what not to touch and to, how to disclose to somebody that something's happening. So there's a lot of change happening, and I think the community as a whole is more open to listening and believing people. So the bigger challenge was that people, you didn't believe them.
No, it wasn't talked about. Don't embarrass the family at 100%.
Yeah. So there's still a heap of work to do.
So is your part more on the business focus? Because even though it's a charity, it still have to be profitable to help people.
Well, it's not for profit, but and that was one of the challenges too, is that you do have to run it like a business, right? So that was a big focus of mine to go in there and say, you can't not ask for money because the more you get in, the more you help. This is directly attributed to, and we're one of the biggest charities in terms of output, in terms of the cash that turns into helping the community. So there's very little kept in the organisation for overhead. So it's making sure that there is more money coming through to help more. When we've got waiting lists of kids and they're the ones that are telling you there's a problem, or we've got waiting lists and we can't get enough counsellors in there, that's a problem, right? So then how many more are not disclosing and not coming forward and we can't reach? So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Well, 1 in 5, that's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, and that's a stat we need to explain more because I think and a lot of people, unless it's happened to them or they know someone, they're kind of like, well.
I totally get it. Like it's to me, it's like, and this is my own opinion, I almost don't want to hear about it on the news because it's so disturbing for me if someone who hasn't dealt with it in my family or anything that I do, like I've unintentionally
you avoid it. If I see something on the news, I'm like, do you see that? He's like, don't hear about it.
Because it's
I'm
so
in a
like
perfect bubble.
it's so shocking to me, and like it causes like pain. Like even the Westpac thing was just like I hadn't even considered that was like a thing.
Yeah.
And then my brain has to then realize that that's a reality. And then probably how you felt, you feel like a little helpless and like disturbed that you're not doing something, you don't know what to do. It's like this black hole of something.
But the conversation is important, right?
100%.
So even now talking through that, and even with my friends, you know, I've brought them along to the White Balloon Days and you know our charity events and balls and things, and they are mind blowing, right? So they go in there and go, holy shit, we didn't realize this, and you hear from some of the survivors, and particularly, you know, when you see things where you know, little kids will walk in, you see a photo. Oh, you got to tear up. You see a photo when they first come in. A picture they've drawn. Really sad, really dark, horrible. After the counselling, they draw a picture and it's, you know, happy and rainbows and sunny. Right?
Yeah.
So it's, you know, that's the
change.
impact. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like, because I have a younger brother, and I remember like when I was a kid, I was always like worried about him being abducted. Like it would like keep me up at night. I couldn't explain it. I'd like just seen whether it's too many things in the news or whatever. And it was like, so is like trauma that hadn't happened or something. It was just like the fear of like him being abducted by school or something. So then as I've gotten older, I do completely blank out those news stories and stuff because I find them just like so hard to like settle with.
Yeah.
So the job that you've taken on is huge.
Yeah, it's I love the approach now where it's, you know, over the years we had that focus of, you know, more helping the survivors and working on the counselling after the fact. Whereas now we still do that. That's a huge part of our work. But the other part is the education beforehand.
Addressing the issue
and,
before.
You know, making sure teachers know or anyone working with kids, what do they need to look out for? There's symptoms, you know, what are those things that you could be looking out for or in your own families or educating parents.
Yeah.
You know, what to watch on. There's a calculator.
Like don't just send your kids over to some stranger's house for a sleepover because you haven't met them before. Like,
I mean, my daughter had a 10th birthday party. I said she could have 5 friends, 20 rock up. So,
perfect.
So, meanwhile, that's the last birthday party she's had.
Ever.
But anyway, I was surprised that we'd never met these parents and they just dropped them off at the door.
That's what they
A lot of them didn't even come in. And then
didn't
half
meet
of
whose
those
house
kids,
they're staying at or.
which is kind of surprising. Like my boys have never gone. They're younger, but they've never gone and stayed anywhere else. And I just think I just find that weird.
Well, I get it. My mum, as a kid, I'd like beg to stay over at certain people's houses, and I remember her just being like, no, and I could never like, why won't you let me have fun? But then she hadn't met the parent, and she hadn't met who lived in the house, and it's precautionary, but it makes sense. Like, stay at people's houses, you know, and it's hard that that's like how the world has to be, but it does just maybe it's that extra bit of care and precaution, if you will, that could help avoid a situation.
You can't take it back once it's done, right?
100%.
So that's, you know, it's that, you know, in kids and Ubers and, you know, there's a whole heap of things there that you need to really, and it is because we're close to it, because I'm working in that space and helping Bravehearts, I'm more aware of it, but we need to have the discussion and be talking about it more.
And what's the best way to help? Like from our point of view, say if is it money? Is that always going to be the best way, or is it time?
Always, because that goes straight into the
Yeah, that's what I was
counselling and the
gonna say.
education. That, but I'd say the chatting about it, not, you know, and it is saying
The conversations that happen when you're not around.
yeah, or if you see you know, I know it's simple, it's a social media thing, because more people are likely to kind of maybe look at the social media story, because it's not all doom and gloom either, right? So look at that and say, did you know this? There's some education that comes through, and just share that. So even in a subtle way, people are educating themselves on what it's about. So, I mean, if you see that, then share it. Having the discussion more, encouraging it not to be
Blind to.
yeah. So that's good. Money always, because it goes straight back into the helping. And we get into, you know, the schools. You know, this thing with the 1 in 5, right? You think we go into a classroom, there's 30 kids there. There could be 6 of those kids. That's
That's what
crazy.
blew my mind when I was reading about it.
And Indigenous is 1 in 3.
Wow.
So that's terrible. 2% of our population would have a huge, huge impact.
And then hurt kids always hurt other people. And it's like that, like you said, like slowing down or stopping the progression, because it's like hurt adults are then destructive in society and everything.
I think the other thing is, you know, the different changes in it. And so you know, the kids, what are the kids watching and what are they sharing? And are they sharing photos they shouldn't be sharing? And, you know, what are they looking at on social media? And, you know, those
But how
sorts
far do
of...
you go as a parent?
Yeah, well, we've got parent packs to say these things, simple things to look for. There's certain, like I didn't even know, right? There's another app. So if your kid's got 2 calculator apps on the phone, one of them is actually a kind of a kids porn thing, right? So they chat on there, and then there's videos and
To hide
photos
it from the
coming
parents.
through. Yeah, and it looks like a calculator.
On the App Store.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And Apple, I guess, are aware of it.
I
Like
don't
their
know.
own messaging app.
Yeah. So that was, I think that one, they're trying to pull that down, but that's a challenge, right? There's
Yeah.
that stuff. There was other, you know,
Sick. Gross.
I had a licensing agreement years ago with Moshi Monsters. So we had this license to the kids thing. So there was an in-app chat. Found out, and you have to, they say you've got to be, so the kids game is for 6 to 12-year-olds. You've got to be over 18 to do the chat. So but there was like 40% of them were adults, right? Pretending to be kids.
And they would tell one friend, be like, oh, look where you can get them. Like, that's what those sickos would do.
Is it? And I'm super curious. Like, what do you think? Because obviously, and this is a taboo topic itself, but I've seen like societies moving away from like, I'll call it like traditional like lynching to like education to informing. You see shows in the States where it's like Chris Hansen catches someone and then they publicly shame them, and it's meant to like stop other people from doing it. But then I wonder if like people who are like perverted then suppress it, and then it becomes kind of more underground, and then they're like, they operate in secret per se. They're more destructive. How do you address
we're against that, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious of, because like we're starting to learn like public shaming is not the best way to get someone to change. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's right. It's. I think and you still get, even with,
because no one wants to be sympathetic.
Undeniable
no one wants
evidence
to be,
there will still be half the population who go, no, he's innocent.
And no one wants to be sympathetic towards a pedophile at all. Like, it's your last natural response. Yeah. So it's like, what is, or like, I'll let you explain.
Yeah, no, I mean, Hetty, and that was one of the mandates. And we're saying, should we, and the government trying to have the lists for the pedophiles and, you know, and say what address they're in and whatever. You've also got to understand that a lot of, there are, unfortunately, people who are accused and are innocent.
Yeah.
And particularly when you go through the family court. So there's a bigger challenge. We're also working with, you know, Royal Commission on working with the child courts but, you know, there's some things there where a husband and wife separate, and so they'll accuse them of that because they want custody of the kids. So it's really hard to then say, yes, that person is, when you really, you know, you may not know. And some of them need to be re-educated, and they can. Some can't, right? And then that needs to be dealt with a different way. But I think you're right, it is education, and as much as we can is to look at, from the earliest age possible, that, you know, kids know, because a lot of the kids, after we do a Ditto program, we get them disclosing. They'll come to the teachers or the educators and disclose and say that that's happened to them, but they didn't know that was wrong.
Yeah, they weren't even aware.
Yeah, so how many kids don't know that?
Yeah.
That's wrong, and they should say something. So it's that education as early as possible, so that the self, you know yourself, whether that's right or wrong. Your parents, your grandparents, your friends, whatever, can kind of look and see if something's, you know, changed. And
should it almost be, because like I think back on my like schooling, and I think about all the things that I wish were different. Like, I wish almost like confidence was part of the class. Like, hey, everyone walks into the class, you decide between a hug and a high five before we start the class. Because I remember like some kids would go sit in a certain corner and be ostracized just because they decided to sit in a certain part of the classroom. Like, it's almost like you walk into work, imagine not saying hey to everyone. It would be like, are you pissed off today? Like, do we not understand something? I think kids can interpret that as well. Yeah. And if a kid goes and sits by himself every time, you kind of get more and more ostracized from the rest of the class. I think like that'd be a huge part of schools, like creating confidence in the classes, getting kids to talk to each other. And then maybe is that part of like the curriculum where it's like having open conversations about what's normal at home and what's not.
Yep.
So that it's not like a case of so-and-so gets taken away for counselling and now he comes back and everyone wants to ask what happened or shame them, whatever. It's more of like an open, comfortable conversation.
Yeah, but I think I always think you know, we spend more time on algebra than we would on emotional intelligence, right? So how do you, and even coping mechanisms for kids. You know, their day, I mean, I sat there with my daughter the other way, and their whole life's falling apart. She's having a shit day. And I'm like, it doesn't all go to plan, right? You can have the best laid plans don't work. And you need to know how to get yourself out of that and to move on. And I think it's that, you know, coping, it's how you communicate, it's okay to feel stuff. It's not, you know, a friend of mine went through a breakup. I said, you've actually got to stop and feel that, right? So otherwise it'll come out across, manifest in a different way.
Decide to drink it away or something.
Yeah. So it's you know, understanding what that is and being more aware and in tune with that to say, okay, how do I now deal with that so it doesn't become a bigger problem?
You realize how big the job that teachers have is. And then the pay scale as well. Like, it's like just like imagine dealing with all those emotional things, then the school teachers going through her own breakup at the same time. It's like, oh my God, where do you even start?
We had a whole new with COVID, with the 4 kids at home, we're doing teaching with the kids homeschooling. I'm like, you appreciate teachers so much more.
I bet.
They're the backbone of this country. Yeah.
And they are completely underpaid.
Yeah. Well, we even talked about this with like Robbie Katter saying that politicians get a bad rap for being overcompensated or paid well, but at the same time, you want the best person in the job.
Yeah.
Like, people don't want to do a job when the pay restricts you or your lifestyle, whatever it may be. Like, I don't know what politicians get up to on their spare time, but I'm sure it's like they can't bribe each other. Like it's very like closed doors.
Yeah.
So to me, I'm like, I don't know, it just seems to make sense. Like paying the teachers more, paying the politicians more creates a better society
Yep.
overall.
Yeah, and medical,
Yeah.
nursing, any of those frontline, they all need to be paid more, right? So I think, I agree. And
You
I
don't
tell
get
you
into
what,
those jobs for money because you don't wake up one day and go, you know what, I want to be a nurse for 12 hours a day at night shift and kind of flip old people over because they've been on their back for too long and stuff. Like it's not a money thing for them to begin with. Like artists, if you will. Like someone doesn't get into music for the money straight away, but sometimes the best ones, that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they do. And I'll tell you what, you wouldn't want to be a politician with Quins though, would you? Like they rip you apart. The
That's what
media
Robbie
and-
was saying.
He's saying because of his
He used to
dad.
be sick in the stomach, so he never wanted to be in politics. And when he did, he goes, they were vultures to me. Like they knew I was Bob Catter's son, and they just went hard.
Yeah.
He goes, I used to sit in the car and be like, you can't do this, you're not going in. And he'd go in, and then he'd go,
Ripped to
all right,
shreds, yeah.
Yeah, they're terrible. And,
Far out.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad my opening statement was good. This was an awesome conversation. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah.